Each year, Games Workshop celebrates some of its biggest nerds. The ones that suffer, the ones that grind, the ones that endure and spend hundreds of hours painting up these gorgeous miniatures for the thrill of potentially lifting up the prestigious Slayer sword. Golden Demon is the most well-known painting competition in the world, most likely the longest running one too. But it's more than that. It's a great opportunity to meet up with the community of like-minded individuals and to talk to people that share the same love for the hobby we all do. This year's leg of the European Golden Demon returned to the mainland at the Spiel Games Fair in Essen, Germany, and it did not disappoint. Almost 1,000 entries were displayed over the course of 4 days, and among all the spectacular winners, a brand new Slayer Sword winner has been crowned. And in this video, I want to look at some of the most stunning entries with you all and show you my favorites in the competition, even if they have not placed in the top 3. Now, Golden Demon wouldn't be Golden Demon without its controversies, and we had quite a handful of them again this year. But we'll cover this at the end of the video. For now, let's look at the winning entries. We are starting strong right away with the Warhammer 40k single miniature category, where the 3rd place was taken by a Golden Demon regular, Ruben Mortensen, with this iconic Khorne miniature. His style is very suited for Golden Demon. High contrast, dark shadows, and very bright highlights, all while keeping a very clean rendition of the transitions. All of this can also be said about Yura's silver winning entry here, who is putting this crude into a lovely little desert scene. Gold in this category goes to Lucas Saba, also known as Saba Art on Instagram, where he sculpts, paints, and sells these lovely busts and small critters. And his style is just so perfect for Golden Demon. The smooth blends, not only on big areas like the back of the creature, just look at the orc itself and how each individual muscle is blended to perfection. That, in addition to the background that blends in perfectly, probably sealed the deal. Here's a crazy story. Lucas told me that he didn't expect to win anything, so he was only at the auditorium for the winner ceremony because they emailed him. He was dumbfounded when he realized that he won gold. But of course, I was not. This category also saw one of my favorite entries in the show, Richard Gray's Spider Autarch, that only got a finalist pin on the very last day. I saw this taking one of the trophies, and so did many that saw it in person. And that is not to take any of the laurels away from the winners. This piece is just really well executed. Just look at the light on the armor, how the ambience is reflecting in it, the level of detail, like the energy in the chamber of the weapon and the sword, the intricate freehands and the subtle blends on the black parts. It's just hard to understand how this didn't at least score a commended entry. A lot of these entries probably took hundreds of hours, and even if you are not painting for Golden Demon, there's no doubt we spend way too much time sitting down while hobbying. That's why I have always been a fan of standing tables, because simply being able to adjust the height of the tabletop helps so much with keeping your posture and your back healthy while spending these long hours cleaning miniatures, painting, or kit bashing. Finally, I found a standing desk manufacturer that I can recommend wholeheartedly. FlexiSpot not only produces stylish products that fit a variety of furnishings, their quality is also amazing, and all of that comes at a very reasonable price. Not only does a FlexiSpot desk help with fine-tuning your painting posture, personally I also like the possibility to switch the height for different tasks. Like when I'm done with painting and I have to edit videos, I just do that standing up, because it helps me to move my muscles and decompresses my discs. Because let's face it, nothing is more unhealthy than sitting in the same position for hours on end. The desk remembers my settings, so all I have to do is press one button and it will move to the appropriate height. Unlike those cheap desks made out of flimsy aluminum, FlexiSpot's frames are made of automotive grade steel with thickened legs, which makes them extra sturdy. FlexiSpot provides all kinds of standing desks to meet your demands. I have the E7 Pro that fits in all kinds of tight workspaces, but they also have heavy-duty desks with 4-leg designs or these corner desks that will fit any office perfectly. They also offer these comfortable ergonomic chair solutions and ultra-slim walking pads to complement your new standing table, as well as a ton of other accessories. So do your back and health a favor and check out FlexiSpot using my link in the description and grab an extra $50 off of the E7 Pro desk using my code on screen. Way down we go. And speaking about commended entries, one of those that I liked a lot in this category was this Terminator Captain by Carlo Gobello. Very clean execution, high contrast, especially in these blue armor parts. A very clean execution overall, lots of glazing to get the transition smooth while keeping the colors vibrant. Warhammer 40k unit gave us 3 very unique styles of presenting miniatures, and especially squad entries. We saw the classic unit on gaming bases and an extra plinth with Evelina's orcs, Andy Waddle's Warlock Conclave with Farseer on a shared display base, and this very somber piece of a Krieg regiment giving the last rites to the remains of some unlucky casualties of the battle that just happened. This one feels a lot like a diorama, especially with all the painted background added. One of my favorite entries in this category was these Incubi by Sumikitu, who you probably know from his YouTube channel. These are really blended to perfection, maybe a little too perfect, who knows. Next up we have the 40k large miniature of vehicle category, with this land speeder placing 3rd, an homage to the heavy metal style, heavily focusing on getting these edge highlights clean and crispy. A 2nd place going to this Invictor tactical warsuit, very heavily relying on the airbrush to build up gradients and then brushwork to push the contrast. And the 1st place is going to this Night Lord's Demon Engine that has collected itself a few trophies, or maybe a snack for later. A favorite of mine in this category was Aaron Clark's Norn Emissary, that puts a twist on the iconic High Fleet Behemoth scheme. The highlights on the carapax looking more like how actual light would reflect off of them, and the reds looking extra reflective with the very bright white highlights. And Warhammer Age of Sigmar looked like a very strong category, at least judging from the winning entries. Magnus Nielsen giving us a Stormcast painted in full non-metallic metal, displaying a great understanding of light reflections off of different materials. And any single detail on this Ogre Hunter is also rendered beautifully. Albert returned to the competition as well, and for the 3rd consecutive year is taking gold in this very prestigious category with his Orc Shaman. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't invest more than 500 hours again, starting with the planning and the conversion, which you can see here. He even built a squig out of the lower side of a troll face. Crazy. Every single detail is perfection. The highlights on the base details, the rendition of light on the gold pieces, the color shifts, the textures, and of course the blends. Even though the event pictures this year were great, I'm sure they don't do the miniature justice, and it simply blows you away in real life. Another one of my favorites comes from the EOS unit or Warcry Warband category. Jonathan DeVos putting together a masterclass in base building with the Seraphon unit that is stalking through a jungle type setting. The use of different foliage and moss tufts is gorgeous, and it's drawn together beautifully with these green shades of paint, and even the miniatures blend into that scenery seamlessly. This looks like the characters are parts of a living and breathing environment, and they look like they could jump off of the base any minute and just run away. In the same category we find this gem, a really fun take on the unit entry, just a ton of squigs hopping around and bumping into each other. And speaking about squigs, Liam Hopkins gave us another very adorable squig entry in this category, and I just love the base with the giant mushrooms. Also the color choice for the tongues and the way that light catches on the faces of these mean machines. This must have been a real eye-catcher in the cabinets. Yeah, this one was really nice, but we talked about it before. Maybe that one, but might have been punished a bit for having that really large display base, where maybe they didn't like the style or the maggots or whatever. Who knows? Because I feel like it was on par with some of these entries, right? Maybe not the winning entry, but the other two. Another result that was at the very least puzzling was Sumikito's Nurgle Boys not even getting a finalist pin. Like, even if you didn't like the style, objectively, the execution would have at least deserved that. Again, I haven't seen it close up, but all the pictures that I saw before, the close-ups of the blending and all of that, I feel like that was definitely on par too. So if that one placed second or third, I don't think you could have argued. Wonder why they didn't like that one, or at least not enough. Age of Sigmar Large Miniature gave us this gem. Dave Perryman, also known as Infernal Brush here on YouTube, must have invested hundreds of hours into this Trog, the Troggoth King. And the other thing about this mini is just crafted to perfection. The sculpted base with the small pond that has a perfect resin pour, down to the little waves and the foam crowns playing on top of them. The subtle color shift and the stones from a more bluish tint towards these yellowish highlights and all the way up to these lush greens indicating some moss overgrowth, and a lot of these brown and grayish tones in between, making the base a masterpiece in itself, rounded out by these small flying creatures giving a little extra character. And we haven't even started to talk about the mini yet. All of it is just rendered to perfection in a very heavy metal studio style, which is no coincidence, since Dave was part of the heavy metal team for a while before taking off on his own and creating painting guides for a living. And while everything is really close to the official box art, it's just impossible to find any flaw in this. From the gradients on the antlers to the skin detail and the subtle added textures when needed. It's just a very popular style dialed up to 11. Another favorite of mine was this Demon Prince by Thibaut, a heavily converted miniature with a lot of small details like the warping tree reminiscent of the Tzeentch symbol, the base generally looking like reality is bending around the demon in an awesome way due to how all of the lines and curves are placed, and how the mini in conjunction with the base almost creates a circle. And last but not least, it's a lot of different textures and materials looking like they bend to the will of the Lord of Change. And again, the little Tzeentch creatures adding another interesting touch. The mini itself has a more painterly style. Just look at the weapon and how the reflections on them behave, as well as the different armor parts, showing more complex reflection patterns and color combinations. All blends look really crisp while still retaining a high level of contrast. Overall, I think this is a great piece, very representative of the best Golden Demon has to offer, with parts of it being converted, but staying true to the lore and the universe itself, showing off all the skills you have while playing well within the unspoken rules of this competition. Really one of, if not my favorite of the competition. Warhammer Underworld's Warband saw a diverse bunch of winners. I feel like the nature of this category, where we get box sets of miniatures ready to form a warband, makes these always very coherent in design, and at the same time very diverse. Like if we look at the Crimson Court, or Ephelim's Pandemonium, just gives you a bunch of different minis, and I think that helps with avoiding burnout while painting 5 or so very similar miniatures. I want to give a small shout out to Xavi Paints Minis here, who entered this warband in a very unique arrangement, but got moved to diorama instead, where he faced really large competition. He used a lot of grass and moss tufts in a very proficient way, but most of all, I just like the idea of the dog parkour and the handler shouting instructions. Just such a cool and different way to present the warband. Very few painters stand out like Angelo Di Cello, because he is the person with the single most Golden Demon trophies. He has won 66 of them before this event, and this small dwarf vignette earned him the 67th trophy in gold nonetheless. And Angelo is showing us again why he won so many trophies. Just look at the way he is rendering these details, very clean lines and edge highlights, even on small details like the nose, eyelids and fingers. Everything is very meticulously defined in a very heavy metal studio style, showing incredible skills with creating smooth blends on a very confined space while keeping the contrast up. I really like this Eomer from the Middle Earth category because don't forget how small these miniatures are. With a lot of scale creep in 40k and Age of Sigmar, the Lord of the Rings minis have always been on the smaller side of 28mm miniatures. And the way that all the little intricacies are rendered on this mini is just mind-blowing. The armor skills, the leather armor details and how crisp the edge highlights are on it, as well as the color variation on the chainmail. But the real kicker is the face and how well it is painted. It really looks like there's a real person staring off into the distance. And now let's talk about a few entries that were truly gorgeous, but were not awarded for one reason or the other in this category. The first one being Lucas Saba's Witch King leaving Minas Morgul diorama. Just look at how he did the light radiating out from the opening doors and the shadow the Witch King is casting. Very impressive, and I would really like to know why this wasn't considered for one of the top spots. And we have to talk about Niels Anderson's entry at this point. The Lord of the Rings category has always been defined by the license deal Games Workshop has with New Line Cinema. Basically, it was always a risk to convert these minis because all designs were originally approved by the license holders, and if Games Workshop presented altered versions at an official event, they could be in trouble. Silly, but that's how it goes. What Niels did here was 3D scan this original Gollum, and then he modified the pose digitally to fit the scene he had in mind. As you might know, I do online coaching for painting, and a lot of people who want to enter the Golden Demon come to me for advice before they start. And during our very first session, I told Niels that this is a big gamble. And I was almost sure he would get disqualified, but he progressed with this idea anyway, going through a lot of iterations of base designs to find the perfect one. Eventually he settled on this one and then painted it up beautifully. The directional light from the lava builds this incredible mood, and the light on Gollum radiating out from the One Ring finishes out the scene perfectly. And again, don't forget how small the figure actually is. Usually clearly a gold winning entry, but it just wasn't meant to be. The Blood Bowl category was again dominated by Nicola's distinct style, but my favorite here was the small diorama by Rodrigo Frias, who gives us a very dynamic scene. The winners in the Necromunda category all gave us little scenes and storytelling instead of just single figures. And Darion designing this vignette that looks very crisp besides being very dirty and rusted on closer inspection. And John Gerthy gave us this little canyon scene that's just really well painted and has all these little details like the critters and the leopard pattern on the bike. And this is, by the way, the only instance where I thought the pictures Games Workshop took are not doing the piece justice. If we compare the pictures on John's Instagram, the piece looks even more stunning there. The epic scale saw 3 very neatly executed mini dioramas. This scale just lends itself to this type of entries. I just love that you can use titans and drop pods and even little Tau mantas to build epic dioramas that don't take up half your living room. James Taro won this category with the Bloody Reaver, and the most impressive part of this piece to me was the water and how realistic the wave patterns and the general look turned out. Diorama Duel is one of these categories that by definition produces stunning entries non-stop, and we also did not leave disappointed this time either. Rodrigo winning his second demon with this Triumph of St. Catherine Procession. I really like how he used this plastic terrain and built a very unique setting around it with the stained windows and especially the whole scene sloping down a curved staircase. It's just phenomenal because the slope helps with showing all minis properly and adds a layer of movement that the original piece doesn't necessarily have. This is just pure genius. Every now and then a piece comes along that is best described by "this is just screaming Warhammer" or Warhammer 40k in this case. And Powell's clash of Ultramarine and Corn Forces is such an example. So much thought went into designing this scene, starting with the background, which is obviously a little stylized around the symbolism of the 2 clashing battle groups. Skulls and chains for the Khorne side and relics, icons and a stylized eagle and a ton of purity seals and scrolls for the Ultramarines. With dioramas of this size involving a ton of miniatures, we also often see a trade-off between the macro level effects like placement of light, arrangement and storytelling, and level of detail in the individual figures. It almost has to be that way if you don't want to spend 2 years on a project like this. But if we look closely, the level of detail is really crazy too. Just zoom in on any random figure or this banner back here and you see what I mean. However, Golden Demon wouldn't be Golden Demon if smoothness wasn't king, which we can also see in the fantastic winning entry by Erka Marthio with this Space Wolf smiting down a winged hive tyrant. The resin pour and the underwater scene are just hyper crisp, and the rest of it is not lagging far behind either. Look at the rendition of light on the armor of the Space Wolf and the gradients on the wings. Little details like the gushing of blood from pieces getting chopped off left and right, and the splash of water makes this scene just come alive. The Youngbloods category is always fascinating to see. Imagine being under 14 and able to paint like this, and you still got decades of improving ahead of you. This Lord of Blights caught my eye, especially since it looked curiously familiar when I looked at the hammer especially and all of the color choices. The open competition in the past has been a place for everything that did not quite fit the mold of any of the other categories, and ideally it didn't just barely not fit, it exploded out of there with creativity and ingenuity. This year gave us more conservative entries, my favorite probably being gold in the category. For some reason, the way that Pierre built these bunker structures and all the little cracks and textures and the brown tones in the rubble, all of that just looked super intriguing. But we have to talk about Christian's Ultramarine, simply because it drummed up so much noise in the community. The story behind this entry is that he took this to the event to show Dave Perryman, aka Infernal Brush, who we already know from the monster category. He simply wanted to show Dave the result he was able to achieve following one of his online tutorials to the T. And Dave said, hey, why not enter it into open just for the fun of it? And here we are. The piece is executed to perfection, but of course the criticism was that it looks like the box art of any given Games Workshop release, and whether or not that should be what Games Workshop should be looking for in their premiere painting events. And this is not to knock any of the winners in this category, they all should be over the moon, and as someone who was bullied for entering their first Golden Demon decades ago, with a piece that was inspired by someone else's work, I know how it feels to go in all blue-eyed, with no intentions to win, just for the fun of it, and then winning and facing all this unfiltered noise on the internet. And I very much hope Christian will not be turned away from the awesome hobby that is miniature painting. He just entered the right mini at the right time, with the judging moving towards more traditional entries and painting styles again. And while Christian did nothing wrong, I hold Games Workshop accountable for the category not turning into a place again where painters enter maybe a second single mini, but to make it a category where thinking out of the box entries are becoming a thing again. And it's not like there was no special entries that would have deserved a closer look, like Thibaut's Orc on Warboar that he scratch built and painted up beautifully. But it's just another piece in the puzzle that hints towards Games Workshop wanting the competition to move towards a more corporate marketing event again. But hey, maybe Games Workshop proves us wrong again with the next iteration. But we have to give the Slayer Sword winner its much deserved spotlight, and as you probably already predicted, it went to David's spectacular King of Troggles. Very well deserved, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. A truly incredible Slayer Sword winner, fitting right in there with a great line of awesome miniature art, winning this prestigious trophy. So after celebrating the winners and great entries of this event, let's talk about a few things that left a bit of a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. I feel incidents like Richard Gray's Autark almost being overlooked could be remedied by assigning a few more judges. I gathered that there were only 2 plus Roman Lappard, which I didn't know what his job description exactly was, but he's probably more like a passenger, and they're going to ask him for his opinion, but the other two are in charge. But ultimately, 2 to 3 judges in charge of more than 1,000 entries is just not a lot of people for the task. I think you should have 5 plus additional staff from the creative teams to help with the workload. Another overarching cause for surprise was the obvious shift when it comes to what is valued in the competition, where I feel in the US, this year and in the past few years in general, the competition was a lot more open-minded and a lot more creativity was rewarded. While here, there was a focus on traditional Golden Demon values. At least that's what I feel like when I see scratch-built entries like Thibaut's or Hendarion's falling completely by the wayside, while they were allowed to win Slayer Swords in the past. Just remember the Slayer Sword from Adepticon. It was 3D scanned and mirrored, and there was a lot of 3D printing. Officials were heard saying technology should be used more in the spirit of the competition, which to me means that they will try to discourage people from using any type of digital and 3D printing technology to protect their interests. Leaving disqualifications due to licensing issues out, like with the Golem by Niels, which I kinda get, it still feels like entries that were composed in a simpler, more straightforward way were preferred, while something like more complex presentation bases, which was more and more the norm in past events, like the US leg of Golden Demon this year, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, were not awarded. It has been another event where there was judges from the PR and events team instead of any of the creative departments, and I simply don't get that. Every time we make a step forward, it feels like we're taking 2 steps back with how the Golden Demons are run. Every time we think there's improvement and we think we have it all figured out what Golden Demon is about, the goalpost moves and it's a complete shift in priorities and what the unspoken rules are. And it just feels disrespectful towards the painters that invest hundreds of hours into their entries, only to find out that they are not going to be judged because the rules, or let's say what is going to be tolerated, changed last minute internally again. But such is the nature of Golden Demons. I said it 20 years ago and I'll say it again. While we see amazing pieces win every time, it will always remain a bit of a lottery in the context of the competition being what it is, a marketing event for Games Workshop. And if you enter, be aware of that, enter for the fun of it, and don't be sad if you lose. Just focus on meeting old friends, making new ones, and seeing amazing pieces of miniature art close up and in the flesh, or plastic. Golden Demon is what we make of it, so let's make it the most we can.